Well, it's the end of yet another week, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take, Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week based on what's been going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, we saw the second half of the NBA season start back up after the conclusion of the All-Star break, and there's definitely a lot to talk about as a result, so here we are. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, so if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, it turns out about 65% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing comes to us from Sean, and he says that Trae Young is the most overrated player in the NBA, and that despite having great stats on paper, his style of play will never result in the success of the team in the win column. This is a take that has grown more and more over time, especially this year, because the initial honeymoon phase of Trae's surprisingly tremendous production is starting to wear off. Last year, he unquestionably had a great season, putting up 29.5 points per game and about 9 assists per game as well on top of that. But the Hawks were also one of the worst teams in the league last year, and virtually everything on the offensive end of the floor ran through Trae Young. People, especially recently, have grown to be a lot less impressed with elite production if the player isn't leading the team to success, and we're definitely starting to see that with Trae. The Hawks this offseason also focused on bringing in veteran guys that would help elevate them into a playoff push, and while they're definitely in a decent spot with a good chance to make the playoffs if they keep going, it's really just because of how weak the Eastern Conference has been this year, as the Hawks are currently 3 games below 500 with a record of 17 wins and 20 losses. I personally think Trae does have some flaws that are starting to get emphasized more now, such as his poor defensive presence and his shot selection, and the way he goes about drawing fouls definitely rubs people the wrong way. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think he's overrated per se. I think at this point the majority of fans recognize everything he does well and where he struggles, so for now he seems pretty accurately rated, if anything, by most. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from Zach, and he says that Jamal Murray will never reach the level of being a true star player, similar to Mike Conley. So I found this take interesting for a couple reasons, and there are parts that I agree with and parts that I disagree with. I see what he means when he says that he'll never reach that star status, because by that I believe he's saying that he'll never actually end up being in that top tier of scoring guards that find themselves on the All-NBA lists and All-Star teams year in and year out, but ultimately he is still a highly talented player that will probably end up being in the tier below that year in and year out instead. Mike Conley is an example of a player like that who every year throughout his prime was playing terrific basketball. He was helping lead the Grizzlies teams he was on to postseason berths every year, he had solid efficient production across the board, but ultimately he kept on finding himself as the odd man out in individual recognitions. I think players like Conley and CJ McCollum, who are good examples of players that are in a similar tier as Conley, as they're both very good and have countless big games and big moments in their careers like star players do, but they're not fully in that top tier either. Now, do I think Murray will go as long as Conley did before his first All-Star appearance? Probably not. Murray will more than likely have a few All-Star games in his career in the near future, but I don't think he'll ever be a true, genuine star in the league either, if that makes sense. The next take comes to us from Isaac, and he says that when healthy, the Miami Heat are one of the best teams in the NBA, and their recent play proves it. So early in the season, the Heat got off to a pretty terrible start, all things considered. 10 games ago, they had a record of 11 wins and 17 losses, which is just not good enough for a team that was playing in the NBA Finals literally last season. People started calling the team's run last year a fluke, individuals were receiving all sorts of negative press, and the team was almost completely written off by a lot of people. But a lot of other people didn't realize just how hard they were affected by COVID last year. Almost every single key contributor missed extended time because of it in one way or another, especially the team's leader Jimmy Butler, who missed several weeks early on in the season. Ever since Jimmy's return to the court, though, he's worked his way back up to full strength, and he's been balling out, which in turn has resulted in the team balling out and following suit. In the Heat's last 10 games, they have a record of 9 wins and just 1 loss, making them the hottest team in the NBA right now, and after that terrible start, they're back in being 4th place in the Eastern Conference. They're back to looking like the team that we saw last year, but going back to the original take, are they one of the best teams in the league still? Well, there's a lot of basketball left to be played right now until the playoffs start, but I don't think any contender would want to match up with them early on in the playoffs either. The Heat's defense has been incredible lately, and I think if they continue on this path, they will definitely be in the conversation with the 76ers, Nets, and Bucks at the top of the conference. Speaking of which, the final take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Kaizol, and he says a lot here, but to sum it up, he basically says that the Sixers have the best chance at beating the Nets in the playoffs because they have the elite defensive players to throw at their 3 superstars and match up with them the best out of anyone else. There's no question that the Nets are built for a deep playoff push, with 3 superstar players playing together and clicking very well so far. We haven't seen much of Kevin Durant with the trio yet, but James Harden and Kyrie Irving have been tremendous together so far, and those 3 are going to be tough to shut down when it matters later on in the year. I think because of this, the Sixers definitely do have personnel to match up as well or better than anybody else, and the trio he mentioned of Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, and Joel Embiid are why. The key to a great defense is a dominant interior rim protector, which Joel Embiid provides, along with guys that can comfortably defend multiple positions out on the perimeter and accept any matchup. Ben Simmons is, as I see it right now, probably the best defender in the NBA, and he accepts any matchup with any player at any position and does a damn good job night in and night out. Matisse Thybulle is also another one of the most dynamic young defensive playmakers in the league right now, getting deflections, creating turnovers, blocking shots, and getting steals at a rate that very few guys are capable of replicating. Besides the Sixers, though, the Lakers definitely have the personnel to hold their own, with LeBron James still being capable of playing great defense in big moments when needed, and Anthony Davis also doing his job inside as well as he usually does. The Bucks also have the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Giannis Antetokounmpo, along with their new addition Jrue Holiday, who has a history as a very good perimeter defender, and the Clippers also have a plethora of premier defenders like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Patrick Beverley, so I can't say that the Sixers are clearly the best team to match up with the Nets, but they're for sure in that conversation with those other teams that I just mentioned. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the topics we just discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.